Suburban Sentinel here, along with Bella the camera cat, and today I want to talk a little bit about the recent ongoings in Ukraine. For those of you who haven't been following the news story, the country of Ukraine has been thrust into a state of civil unrest and political uncertainty over the last few days. Not only is this an incredible human interest story, but I believe we here in the West have much to learn from Ukraine. A brief, simplistic, and highly incomplete recent synopsis of Ukrainian history is as follows. Ukraine had been part of the Soviet Union, and the country gained independence when the Soviet bloc crumbled. Ukraine is an economically disadvantaged country with some significant financial problems. Now, a good portion of the population of Ukraine wants to become more politically and economically aligned with Europe. Specifically, many Ukrainians want their country to join the economic bloc known as the European Union. Another portion of the country would like to be more aligned with Russia. Now, Russia is already a significant trading partner with Ukraine, and Moscow has significant leverage over Ukraine, as Moscow is the supplier of cash and energy resources to a very broad extent. For several years, the government of Ukraine had been in negotiations with representatives of the European Union to join the EU. However, in the fall of 2013, the Ukrainian government, specifically the president, reversed course and abruptly cut off those negotiations and decided to align Ukraine with Moscow. The president of Ukraine did this under intense political pressure from Vladimir Putin from Russia. Many Ukrainians, particularly those in the western half of the country, were extremely upset by this sudden course reversal. They took to the streets in protest in earnest, and the authorities did have some quite violent crackdowns on the protesters initially, but it was far from a major bloodbath. The protests continued, and the protesters set up a makeshift camp in the central square of the capital city of Kiev. They occupied several government buildings and generally were raising a ruckus. The protests waned somewhat after Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, gave Ukraine some economic incentives. However, the protests did continue, and in some cases, and especially in Kiev, continued in earnest. Although the protests continued for months, there was some negotiation and talks between the government and certain leaders of the opposition groups. But in January, the government really decided to crack down. They tried to get the protesters to disband the camp in the central square in Kiev, and the government passed laws severely limiting the population's right to assemble and protest. And that's when things really started to hit the fan. The protests grew in size, there was more violence, and finally, just a few days ago, and today is the 23rd of February, so this is probably around the 20th, 21st, there were some significant and bloody altercations among the police and the protesters. Scores of protesters were shot by police snipers and automatic gunfire, and things really erupted. This is a situation still in flux at the moment. The latest update is that the president of Ukraine is on the run. The Ukrainian parliament has declared him out of office, and there's some question as to who is actually running the country. And I believe that the word is they're expecting to have elections in May. But again, as of this moment, this is all still in flux. I'd like to take just a few moments and elaborate on the circumstances on the clash between the police and the protesters. Although one can legally get firearms in Ukraine, they are relatively rare, and some of the protesters had guns, but not very many. The biggest weapons were stones, sticks, bricks, Molotov cocktails, and burning materials such as tires and scrap wood. The police were armed, of course, with Kalashnikov rifles, and they had a number of snipers in the central square at least. It's not clear how many police actually participated, particularly the ones who switched sides. That's not very clear at all. One very interesting and significant point is that the Ukrainian military was not involved. As far as I know, the president never declared martial law, and I believe at one point the military announced it flat out refused to intervene. So, what can we here in the West take away from this highly unfortunate set of circumstances in Ukraine? Well, first, it shows that even in this day and age, highly motivated people who are severely outgunned can still effectuate political change by taking to the streets in protest. Now, political change, real change, often requires tenacity, perseverance, and great personal sacrifice. I believe somewhere between 80 and 100 protesters were killed in the protests over the last few days, and my heart goes out to their families. What does the situation in Ukraine teach the dictators and autocrats the world over? Well, unfortunately, this reinforces the idea that any protests and uprisings must be quelled quickly and with overwhelming violent action. And I believe that's what we will see in the future in many other countries. I am in awe of the Ukrainian people. Now, whether aligning the country with Europe or aligning the country with Russia is the best course of action, I don't know. But I have tremendous admiration for those Ukrainians who took to the streets in protest in disagreement with their government's policy, literally risking their lives and in many cases giving their lives for the cause. Here in America, we seemed more concerned about popular culture nonsense than the direction of our government and our people. So that's all I want to say. Thanks for watching. This is the Suburban Sentinel. Please thumbs up and subscribe if you like what you see. Questions and enlightening comments are always welcome. Be safe, everybody.